This is ridiculous, but it's the only way I could edit the video and put photos on top of it without using PowerPoint. So enjoy. God, I'm going crazy here. Okay. Say goodbye to store-bought mediocrity and hello to a delicious and fulfilling recipe for my homemade chicken nuggets. These crispy, delightful, mouth-watering nuggets will have you wondering how you will ever eat frozen chicken from a bag again. As someone with no past experience with cooking other than boxed mac and cheese, it really shows how easy this recipe is. This dish has lots of room for creativity and personalization to match your cooking style and taste. With this recipe, not only is it easy to make, but it can last you up to 3 or 4 days, and you can have it as a snack or an option for dinner if you don't want to prepare meals every day. This gives you an opportunity to relax and warm up your pre-made nuggets for the family with the effortless and healthier option compared to frozen bagged chicken nuggets. This chicken nugget recipe is deliciously healthy, easy to make, and saves lots of time when it comes to preparing food for the week. Take the stress off your shoulders, kick back, relax, and let the oven or the air fryer do the work for the next few days. As a beginner, I will tell you which supplies you will need, the ingredients to gather, the steps on how to prepare them, and how to eat them. When I first started, I based my recipe off of sugarfreelondoner.com, but I made my own modifications to better fit my diet and needs. Processed chicken nuggets can cause a lot of health complications for the consumers. The downsides of processed foods and how they are bad for you is stated wonderfully in the article Frozen Nuggets Nutritional Facts by Jill Castle. To start off, the recipe calls for a baking sheet, a baking rack, toaster, blender, 2 large bowls, 2 forks, a cutting board, a knife to cut the chicken, scissors, a temperature rod, and parchment paper for supplies. When it comes to the food, you need to have half a loaf of extra sourdough bread, 10 boneless and skinless chicken thighs, 2 cups of almond flour, 6 eggs, and spices of your choice. I personally use salt, pepper, garlic, onion, paprika, cayenne, Italian seasoning, turmeric, cumin, thyme, basil, and chili powder. After you have all your ingredients together, it's time to start prepping. First off, to prep the kitchen, clean the counter and grab your parchment paper. Put this parchment paper on a baking sheet and then put the rack aside. Take your almond flour out of the freezer to let it de-thaw. Now that you're all prepped, grab your loaf of bread and toast them all lightly. This will help you cut the bread easier into little squares. Once they are all toasted, cut them up and put them onto your baking sheet with parchment paper. Preheat the oven to 200 degrees Fahrenheit and start on the chicken. The bread can take up to 35 minutes to dehydrate, so this is usually my first step. Now, you can get out your cutting board and your knife along with the chicken. I choose not to marinate or brown my chicken, but that is up to you. Grab your thighs and start slicing. I like to use my knife to cut off as much fat as I can. What this does is to make the nuggets less likely to be chewy. After getting all of the fat off, I like to cut them into about 1-inch squares or 3-inch by 1-inch if you want tenders. You can get creative by cutting different sizes or different shapes if you would like. While working on the chicken, when the oven is done preheating, you can place your bread into the oven for about 30 minutes. Make sure to check at the 15-minute mark and shake the baking sheet around to move the bread a bit. What this is doing is dehydrating the bread so that it's easier to blend. To check if the bread is done, touch it to see if it bends or if it feels dry. If it's dry, take it out and let it cool. After slicing the chicken, place it on top of a baking rack with parchment paper below it and put it to the side. Grab your bowl and fork and all of your seasonings. Personally, I like to measure with my heart, but if that isn't something you're comfortable with, you can use these measurements. Half a teaspoon of salt, garlic, onion, thyme, basil, and a 1/4 teaspoon of pepper, paprika, cumin, Italian seasoning, chili powder, turmeric, and cayenne. After gathering all of your seasonings in a bowl, put that aside and grab your bread or blender. Fill up the blender to about halfway with your bread. Then when you blend this bread, you can add a little bit more again and about halfway. Once the bladder gets full, add it to your bowl of seasonings and repeat. When you run out of bread, keep a little bit of bread left in the blender and grab your almond flour. Now, blend the 2 cups of almond flour with the bread, and once that becomes fine, then add it to the bowl. Use your fork to mix everything together until even. Once this is all mixed, grab your eggs. I typically use about 6 to 10 eggs for a large batch like this one. So you'll crack all the eggs into the bowl and use a fork to whisk your eggs. Now that you have everything ready, you can start combining all of the ingredients. First off, preheat the oven to 425. Put your chicken with the rack on parchment paper and a baking sheet where the bread was. Take your bowl of seasoning, breading, and flour and put it closest to the chicken on the rack. Put the eggs beside the bowl of breading so that the breading bowl is in the middle. The reasoning is for this is you will take the chicken, roll it into the breading, get it nicely coated, put it in the egg, shake off the excess bread, and then put your chicken back in the breading to coat it, and then place it on the cooking rack. Doing this will double coat the chicken and give it a nice crispy outside breading. After repeating this with every piece of chicken, make sure the chicken is nicely spread out and not touching each other. Take olive oil and spread it onto the chicken to make it crispy. Put the chicken in the oven for 15 minutes, flip, recoat with olive oil, then cook for 10 minutes. Use your temperature rod and make sure the chicken is at least 165 degrees Fahrenheit. Let cool and get to eating. I usually will eat the nuggets combined with my favorite Tessemae's vegan ranch. Make sure to clean up properly and sanitize when you're done. Now that you know all of the steps and ingredients you will need to make a delicious meal for you and your family, I hope this recipe goes smoothly and is as easy as possible. With how tasty these nuggets are, it's hard to believe the health benefits. To reiterate, this recipe has lots of room for creativity, so feel free to use different types of spices or chicken to experiment your needs. Growing up, I lived off of frozen chicken nuggets. They were my go-to snack after school, but after getting candida overgrowth, I can't enjoy any of my childhood foods. But with this recipe, not only does it recreate the crispiness and convenience of chicken nuggets, but it also lets me put a creative spin on my personal tastes and cravings. Thank you so much.